There are moments and there are men that galvanize a nation and change history. The weeks following the attack on Pearl Harbor were met with disaster for the United States in the Pacific theater of World War II. Ships were sunk, planes were lost, and troops were forced to surrender. Morale among the military and Americans at home was astoundingly low. Just before Christmas 1941, President Roosevelt expressed his desire to the Joint Chiefs that Japan be bombed as soon as possible to prove to the Imperial Japanese and to Americans that they were not invincible. Hitting Japan would not be easy. The American fleet was reeling, and Japan's defenses were strong. U.S. Army bombers would need to be specifically outfitted not only to launch from aircraft carriers, but to have sufficient range to fly over Japan and onto safety in China. Only one man could be trusted to plan such a challenging mission: the military's best aeronautical engineer, the famous test pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle. On April 18, 1942, Doolittle led 16 B-25 bombers launched from the USS Hornet toward Japan. Each of the 80 men who flew with Doolittle knew that this was likely a suicide mission. Not only did they face Japanese anti-aircraft defenses, after being spotted, they were forced to launch their planes 200 miles early. Even if they made it to Japan, there was now no guarantee they would have enough fuel to reach safety in China. All 16 bombers reached Japan, hitting military targets in Tokyo and several other cities. Short on fuel, each of the crews were forced to bail out or crash land their planes. One landed in Russia, where its crew was interned. 3 men died evacuating their planes. 8 were captured by the Japanese and held prisoner. 3 were executed, and 1 died in captivity. The rest of the raiders regrouped and made their way to safety. Doolittle himself thought the raid was a failure, having caused minimal damage and losing all of his planes. He expected to be court-martialed. Little did Doolittle and his men know that the raid had caused a sensation back home. Morale shot through the roof as the American public, reeling from defeat after defeat, watched as the U.S. military had struck at the heart of the Japanese Empire. Just as important, the Japanese military, shocked by the attack, reorganized its defenses, diverting material to defend the home islands. This would have a huge impact 2 months later as the entire tide of the World War shifted in the Americans' favor following the epic Battle of Midway. Jimmy Doolittle would receive the Medal of Honor for leading the raid on Tokyo. Each of the 79 other raiders were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and the Doolittle Tokyo Raiders would go down in history among the most legendary veterans of the Second World War. 80 men took part in the Doolittle Raid. 62 would survive World War II. Beginning in 1946, just after the war, the surviving raiders gathered each April 18th to commemorate the raid and to honor those lost comrades. In the 1950s, they were presented with a set of 80 silver goblets, each inscribed with the name of a Doolittle Tokyo Raider. Each year, in a solemn ceremony, the Raiders have held a toast to those who died during the preceding year, turning over that Raider's goblet in its wooden carrying case. Doolittle himself passed away in 1993. Today, only 4 goblets remain upright. For decades, that case held a bottle of Hennessy cognac from 1896, the year of Jimmy Doolittle's birth. For half a century, the men of the Doolittle Raid held on to this bottle, agreeing it was only to be opened for one final toast when few remained, commemorating their lost brothers and marking their last official act. That act came the weekend of Veterans Day, 2013, at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. In a special ceremony, 3 of the 4 surviving raiders, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Cole, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Saylor, and Staff Sergeant David Thatcher, came together, and in a moment nearly 71 years in the making, opened that bottle of 1896 Hennessy, toasted their brothers in arms, and completed their final mission.